Today I was walking up at Flamborough Head up on the Yorkshire coast, and I was walking and enjoying the quiet, and it got me thinking that some of the advice given to people over 60, particularly retirees, to get out there and socialise, well, I think it's poor advice. It's actually designed for extroverts. But what if you're an introvert like me? So in this video I thought I'd share some of the footage from the walk and talk about why not getting out there may actually suit introverts better. And if you're watching from the United States, stick around until the end. There is something on this stretch of coastline that connects directly to American history. I'm 65 and I have a confession. I don't have many friends. And I haven't got any best friends. Not the way most people define friends anyway. I've got my wife who's the same age as me. I have a son, he's 28, our only child. I have a few neighbours that I chat to. And I've got several acquaintances. And I do see an old school friend from time to time. More about that later. But if you were to ask me, Nick, how many close friends have you got? Friends that you see every week, that you can go out for a beer with, maybe a game of golf. Well, that number would be zero. And yet, I'm not lonely and I don't feel like I'm missing out. In fact, I'm very content. And that creates an interesting dilemma. Because society seems to believe that if you don't have a large circle of friends, there must be something wrong with you. You must be broken, lonely and isolated. And the advice that you get is usually something like this. You need to get out more, meet new people, nurture some new friendships, get that diary filled up, join some clubs, especially for men over 60. You know the type of thing, cycling clubs, they're very popular, old men in lycra. One of my old school pals retired a couple of years ago and he joined a local cycling club called the Wetherby Wheelers. No thanks, that is not for me. Maybe you should join a golf club, Nick. Well, that's a good walk ruined, isn't it? And not just that, it makes me angry, does that game. But what if you were perfectly happy with a quieter life and less people? And I think this is particularly true if, like me, you are an introvert. Introverts are misunderstood. When people hear the word introvert, they often think shy, awkward, antisocial, lacking in confidence, but that's not what it means at all. I'm not shy. I spent more than 20 years running a recruitment business. You couldn't get a more people-focused business. I spent my days networking, looking for clients, meeting candidates, public speaking, leading sales teams. That is not shyness. Introversion isn't about fear. It's about energy. Extroverts gain energy from people. Introverts lose energy from people. And that doesn't mean we dislike people, it just means large gatherings of people drain our energy. We prefer socialising one-on-one or in much smaller groups. And to recharge, we need regular quiet time with no people. And that's a very different thing. Socialising is a dilemma. I have a school reunion a few times a year. A dozen or so men from my school days meet up for a few beers in Wetherby. My best mate from school always invites me along. And if I'm honest, part of me doesn't really want to go. Not because I dislike anybody. That's not it at all. And it's not because I'm anxious. And it's not because I'm unhappy. I just know what will happen. There'll just be a lot of small talk, reminiscing about how great the 1970s were. They'll be sharing their ailments in a crowded pub full of lots of people, lots of noise, all that social energy going on. And if you're an introvert, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The strange thing is, I'm not sure whether this is healthy introversion. Is it complacency or just inertia? Am I honouring my nature or am I allowing my world to get too small? Honestly, I don't know. And I suspect a lot of introverts might be wrestling with the same question. The world is designed for extroverts. If you're an introvert, you've probably heard the same advice your entire life. You need more friends, more activities, more connections, more people. What if some people don't need more people? What if they need less? Because there's a big difference between being alone and wanting to be alone. I think society often confuses the two, and as a result, a lot of perfectly content introverts spend years thinking they are broken, when in reality, they are just wired differently. One of the strange things about getting older is discovering through decades of interactions how many of your friendships were actually environmental. They weren't necessarily fake. They were very real at the time, but they were held together by something shared. It could be something physical, like a workplace, an office, maybe a factory, or it could have been the car share, or not physical at all, something shared, maybe a shared problem or a challenge. You saw people every day, you talked with them, you laughed together, and you got on really well. And at the time, it felt like friendship, and in a way, of course, it was friendship. But then the environment disappears. You or they move jobs, or maybe they move house, maybe the office shuts, the meetings stop, and the shared routines come to an end. And suddenly, the relationship has nothing holding it up. Not because anyone did anything wrong or anyone was being particularly insincere, but because the friendship was attached to a chapter of your life that has now ended. I think that happens to a lot of people, particularly when they retire. Their work friends vanish and it hits them hard. If you are an introvert, you are not in a rush to replace those people. You enjoy the quiet and you feel okay with it. Retirement can suit introverts. Nobody talks about this. A lot of people struggle with retirement because they miss that daily interaction that work brings. A chat during coffee break, grabbing a sandwich together for lunch, conversations, activity, just that buzz. And even the structure of a 9 to 5 helps. But as an introvert, I can tell you that after getting through the first 12 months, introverts often don't struggle after they retire. You experience something else, relief. For the first time in your life, you can spend more time the way you naturally prefer to spend it, not on some extrovert boss's schedule. You can do whatever you want, whenever you want, on your own terms. And for me, that means reading, walking, thinking, learning, creating. For you, it might be indulging in your favourite hobby, or maybe travelling more, ticking things off your bucket list, or just simply enjoying your own company. And that doesn't make you sad, it makes you content. Solitude is not the same as loneliness. This is probably the most important point in the entire video. Loneliness hurts. It feels like something is missing. Solitude feels different. Solitude feels peaceful. You could almost say it's restful, and it's definitely restorative. I spend a lot of my time on my own, walking in nature, going to the gym, cooking with the music playing, baking some sourdough bread, and researching, filming and editing these videos, and I genuinely love it. I don't feel lonely, I feel relaxed. And the feedback from my Oura ring confirms that I suffer no stress during those moments. But you put me in an environment full of people and my Oura ring shows me in an elevated state of stress. And I think the distinction between solitude and loneliness matters, because if you confuse the two, you can end up trying to fix a problem that doesn't exist. The thing that still concerns me, if I'm honest, this is the part I haven't fully figured out. Today at 65, I'm content. As I mentioned earlier, I have my wife and son, the only people that I truly care about in this world. And right now, that feels like enough. But life doesn't stand still. That much is obvious when I see my 96-year-old Uncle Archie, the last man standing who has outlived everyone in my family except me. So what happens if I lose my wife? What happens if my son's career takes him off to another country? What happens if the small social circle that feels perfectly adequate today doesn't feel adequate at 85? That's the question that I keep coming back to. Not because I'm lonely, because I'm clearly not, but because there's a difference between being content with the present and preparing for an uncertain future. Maybe the answer isn't to force myself to become an extrovert. Maybe the answer is simply to stay open-minded. Open to new people, open to new connections and friendships, without feeling that I need a busy social calendar to prove I'm not broken. I don't have the perfect answer. I'm still thinking about it, and maybe you are too. For most of my life, I thought introversion was something you needed to overcome. Now I know differently. It's something you need to understand and lean into. A smaller social life isn't automatically a smaller life. Quiet does not mean emptiness, and solitude does not mean loneliness. And if you are introverted and retired, retirement isn't a social problem to be fixed. It's the first time your life finally matches your nature. You do not need a busier life or a bigger social circle or a calendar full of events. You simply need to keep finding peace in quieter places. So those are my thoughts, and honestly, I'm still figuring some of this out myself, particularly the question of whether a small social circle that feels perfect today will still feel perfect in 20 years' time. So let me ask you a question. Are you more content with your own company than you were 20 years ago? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. Before you go, if you're wondering about the coastline, this video was filmed at Flamborough Head in Yorkshire, and just offshore in 1779 the Battle of Flamborough Head took place. It was a legendary naval engagement during the American Revolutionary War of Independence. It took place between the British Navy and American forces led by Captain John Paul Jones. That battle is considered one of the most famous naval actions in US history, and it cemented his reputation as the father of the American Navy. I hope that little fact interested you. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.